Reddit, what is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Serious, Part 2.
His girlfriend, him cutting her into pieces and boiling her head. He explained why he killed her and wished he could talk to the parents so they could understand that what he did was a good thing. It wasn't. I sat with him for 45 minutes as he went into detail. Was the most surreal 45 minutes of my life. Source, worked in max security mental health facility.
I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house and we were there for like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are shitting our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. TLDR, don't go into abandoned houses, man.
When I was about 10, all of my cousins and siblings were over, about 10 of us there. The parents and grandparents were out for an adult dinner. So it was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies when all of a sudden the house shook and there was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it, and as a pack we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousins in the group debated on calling the police but opted to call the parents. After a few minutes we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons, just in case. After a half hour with no other issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard and no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years, and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what it was. That has been the scariest thing to happen to me by far.
Okay, so this happened to me last summer when I was back at my parents' house during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m. and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hallway from mine and she could have just came in my room. I went to pick up and the call ended as soon as I reached the phone. I figured that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her, so I busted in and of course nobody was here. After she stopped crying, she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face, and that's when she screamed. So I told her that she called me. She'd tell me that her phone is not in her room and that she was sleeping. Sure enough, her phone is actually downstairs in her purse. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone, but she doesn't. Never managed to explain this one.
My mother told me this not too long ago, but it happened about 10 years ago now. When my cousin was 18 years old, she was in a car crash and had died a couple of weeks later in hospital. She was really close to my dad's sister, our aunt, and used to babysit her kids, who were no more older than 4 years old, all the time. Our aunt's house was under construction just before she passed away, and it continued on after she passed away. One day my aunt got a phone call while she was at work from one of the construction workers complaining about a teenage girl who keeps showing up at the house and walking around, and that she shows up a number of times during the weeks, and it has been happening for a couple of weeks. My aunt asks for a description of the girl to see if she knows her from around the neighborhood, and sure enough the description perfectly matches my cousin who died a few weeks before: long brown hair, red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket. When my aunt got home, she showed them a picture of my cousin and that all agreed that it was the girl they seen walking around the site. This story really freaked me out when I heard it because our family was never one to believe in anything paranormal or have anything of the paranormal sort happen to them before.
When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night we were really bored and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and are just hanging out, talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see, my body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the street light. It was December and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally, I look at my friend and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing. This figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out, he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. I'm scared to get out of bed now.
Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they starting sleeping in separate bedrooms. Blah blah blah, regardless both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out, and I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now, still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room. The room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So, we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are off and I'm still awake, lying on the bed. Then I heard it. Thump. 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 Starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room, where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks. But he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house, and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room, the dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from, too, my grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood. Long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds my grandpa had made it to my room and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, 'I hear footsteps.' I slept under the bed for the rest of my week's stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night, but if it does, I don't want to know. Edits because I'm bad at writing and I can't stay in the same tense."
Okay, this is 100% true. I'm 23 now and this happened about 10 years ago, so I was probably 13 or 14. Anyway, I used to skate, board, all the time with my friends Tim and Brandon. One day, we got done skating and we decided to go to July 11th to get some food/drinks before we went home. Remember, I was only 13/14, so we weren't driving. We had skated to the 7-Eleven and were planning on skating/walking back home. Anyway, we buy our drinks and we left the store. We walked to the parking lot's exit and prepared to cross the highway. It's not a bust highway, since it's a small town. While we waited for the traffic light to turn red, so that we could cross, I looked behind me at the 7-Eleven gas pumps. I noticed a 40 to 50-year-old man, pumping gas into his white truck. He stared at me and before I knew it, he dropped the gas pump and jumped into his truck. He slammed on the gas and sped straight at my friends and I. He missed us, but he grazed my arm and knocked my skateboard out of my hand. My friend, Brandon, screamed, "WTF. You fucking dick," as the man peeled out and sped into the parking lot next to July 11th. I swear to God, he drove through a ditch, which was between July 11th's parking lot and the parking lot he was in, and tried to run us over again. This is where it got bad. The three of us started running at full speed, across the highway and toward the local library, which is like 2 to 3 blocks from 7-Eleven. When we were about 1/2 a block away, I looked back and saw the maniac speeding toward us, full of rage. Brandon and Tim ran up to the library doors and I ran towards the woods. It was Sunday, so I knew the library was closed and there was a trail in the woods which led to my backyard. Meanwhile, this maniac peeled into the parking lot and hopped out of his truck. I looked behind me, before escaping into the woods, and saw him grab either a shotgun or a crowbar. I was pretty far away at this point, and I was freaking out, so my vision wasn't great, from the bed of his truck. I ran all the way home. When I got to my street, my neighbor, Tim's dad, told me to get in his car because we had to go to the video store, which is where Tim's mom worked. When I got there, I found Tim and Brandon. They ran to the video store after realizing that the library was closed, and 3 cops. A minute later, my mom came in, crying her eyes out because Brandon and Tim told her they didn't know if I lived or not. Everyone had thought that I was captured. Tim told me that he saw the guy running after me, into the woods, which is scary because I thought the maniac was chasing them, not me. Anyway, he was never caught, and I spent the next 5 years worrying about every white truck I saw. Sad face. Edit, I forgot the most scary part. Angry face. My town is small, but it's not empty. There were plenty of people around, while this was going on. I felt so helpless, running for my life, while there were at least 100 people around, not doing a thing about it. Also, to be clear, we didn't provoke this man at all. He tried to hit us for no reason, and that's creepy. Brandon called him a dick, but that was after he tried to run us over. We were good kids, trying to walk home, and we almost died/got seriously hurt because of it. Surprised face. Also, bust highway equals busy highway *****.
When I was 8, my family moved from urban South Florida to a really small town in North Florida. It was like from a Goosebumps book. A lot of weird stuff has happened in the 15 years since we moved there, but the weirdest has got to be when my sister moved back in with my parents. My sister's husband had been shipped off to Afghanistan, so she was left alone with a newborn son. Not wanting to go through the soul-crushing loneliness of raising a newborn all alone in a trailer in the woods, she moved back into my parents' house for a while. She said it started first when the headboard of her bed would slam every now and then. Then one day she woke up because somebody was tickling her. She didn't really think about it until one night she woke my mom up by screaming, "My sister is almost 30, she's not a little kid," and my mom went in and the whole fucking bed was rocking and shaking like really violently up down, to the sides, like a boat going through white water. But, my mom and sister have been through a lot of shit, so they persevered. One night my sister was nursing her son and something grabbed her ponytail and started yanking her head around. My mom went in the room and very sternly, like talking to a bad kid, said, "I understand things are different. There's a little baby here and there never has been before. You're curious, I understand that. But you will not touch them anymore. You can look, you can stay. You were here before us, but I swear to God you are not allowed to touch them." It stopped happening.